Georgia deserves to be finally accepted to the NATO full-fledged member.
Right now, we're headed to a mountain rescue. It's already 1:01 outside, and it's not even 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
My grandparents couldn't swim because of segregation.
A search on Google Maps shows a U.S. Senate building has been renamed for John McCain, even though there hasn't been a vote to change it. Senators Chuck Schumer and Jeff Flake want to rededicate the Senate office building that's currently named for Richard Russell, a segregationist who opposed the Civil Rights Act. But Senator Bill Cassidy disagrees, and Majority Leader Mitch McConnell wants a committee to look at other options. French and British fishermen in the English Channel threw stones and rammed each other's boats when a 15-year feud over scallops boiled over. France limits when fishermen can bring in scallops from more than 12 miles off the coast, a rule designed to allow scallops to breed. But Britain doesn't put those limits on its fishermen, and the European Commission is calling for both sides to sit down for talks. The first year of legal recreational marijuana sales in Nevada brought in $70 million in tax revenue. That's 140% more than officials predicted. A Texas congressman is defending spending $300 in campaign funds on dinosaur fossils. John Culberson says he used the fossils to research climate change, but he's been on the record for years questioning global warming. People close to President Trump are having a rocky week. Today, Paul Manafort's lawyers formally asked for his second trial to be moved out of D.C. and down to Roanoke, Virginia. They claim it'll be too hard to find an unbiased jury in the district. And the president tweeted that White House counsel Don McGahn, who has been cooperating with the special counsel's office, will leave his post this fall. Both Manafort and McGahn had big jobs on the president's campaign. But increasingly, investigators seem to be interested in talking to people whose ties to Trump go back much farther.
It might feel like 1,000 years ago that President Trump was just a guy who ran a real estate empire from a building with his name on it in Manhattan. But it was actually just 2.5 years ago. Trump's inner circle back then was guys from his real estate life and his family. But now, that circle has been broken. Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer for years, has pleaded guilty to crimes and implicated the president. According to the New York Times, prosecutors granted Alan Weisselberg, the CFO of the Trump Organization, immunity to testify in front of a grand jury and to share what he knows about the misdeeds Cohen pleaded to. At this point, it's a good bet that prosecutors will be interested in talking to anyone who has or had a senior role in the Trump Organization, just to see what they know. And there aren't that many of them. One of them, quite possibly, is a guy named Jason Greenblatt. Greenblatt worked for years as the chief legal officer at the Trump Organization. There's no evidence to suggest he did anything wrong, but he could be of interest because he was privy to a lot of the sensitive deals the Trump Organization did. And unlike his former colleagues Weisselberg and Cohen, Greenblatt now works at the White House in a really big job. He's the White House's special representative for international negotiations and special envoy to the Middle East peace process. Greenblatt grew up in Queens and went to law school at NYU. Someone connected him to Trump after that. By 2004, he was getting a shout out in Trump's book, How to Get Rich, as a young and talented lawyer who works for me. Greenblatt's 51 now. He tweets and he writes family vacation advice. For example, he recommends dolphin discovery in the Caymans for your next family trip. The fact that Greenblatt works inside the executive office of the president could make it easier for Trump to say Greenblatt is off limits. I called up Mark Rozell, a professor at George Mason. He knows a lot about this kind of stuff. He wrote a book about it.
There are particular cases in history where presidents have claimed that the larger public good mandated that the president be able to withhold information or withhold testimony because of the potential damage that publicly released information or allowing open testimony would cause to the country. I need to make clear, though, that this is a limited presidential power. And where some presidents in the past, I think, have made a mistake is assuming that they can just utter the words executive privilege and everybody else has to accept it. And therefore, they have no right to demand information or require testimony by a White House official.
Executive privilege. Not just something that sounds like a 90s action movie anymore. Something the White House might start talking about if guys like Greenblatt get a call. Again, no one is saying Greenblatt committed a crime, but he's intriguing because in his nearly 20 years working at the Trump Organization, he negotiated business deals on Trump's behalf, including buying a winery in Virginia, selling condos in Trump's downtown Chicago hotel, doing casino deals, and fending off lawsuits from lawyers claiming Trump didn't pay them. We don't know if the special counsel or the investigators in New York want to talk to Greenblatt beyond getting travel advice. The White House didn't respond when we asked. But if they do want to talk to Greenblatt, Rozelle feels pretty sure the White House wouldn't have a great case to try and stop it, because investigators wouldn't be asking about White House business, and claiming otherwise wouldn't make a lot of sense.
That would be a great argument for anybody who gets in legal trouble to find any job they can in the White House, to try to protect themselves from the consequences of any activities they engaged in before assuming government service. That one doesn't even meet the laugh test, to be honest.
A few weeks ago, Amiran Jeyranashvili followed his cows across this ravine near his village and discovered he'd stumbled into Russian-controlled territory. The animals don't know where the boundaries are, do they? This is the place where you were detained? Jeyranashvili was detained in a region that's known as South Ossetia, a breakaway state that Russia considers an independent republic, and Georgia calls occupied territory. In 2008, the two nations fought a brutal 5-day war over this area that ended with a stalemate. But in the last several years, Russia's begun building the trappings of a formal state, installing barbed wire fences and military outposts along what it considers the border. And Georgian officials have been bringing reporters here to show that the situation has only gotten worse. Does it make you angry that people are getting detained while they're trying to do their jobs? For Georgian officials, Russia's actions are making the case for something they've been after for more than a decade: membership in NATO.
Joining NATO and Euro-Atlantic integration is one of top foreign policy priority for Georgia.
David Zakaliani is Georgia's newly appointed foreign minister. Do you think it's really realistic, though? I mean, it has been 10 years.
Yes, it has been 10 years, but we are implementing successfully all reforms in the military and defense sector. We are the biggest per capita contributor to the Resolute Support Mission in Afghanistan, and we are fighting together with United States, together with other NATO allies. I mean, Georgia deserves to be finally accepted to the NATO full-fledged member, and it's the only political barrier towards the final membership.
It's been a frustrating campaign for Georgia. In 2008, NATO promised Georgia it would be offered a formal path to membership. But the invitation has never come, held up by members who don't want to invite an open conflict with Russia. And that's raised a question that Georgian politicians are reluctant to engage with, at least in public. To some extent, are you carrying on as if NATO might not happen?
I think that we have to do our job, what we are doing right now, and to wait for the momentum. And I believe that this momentum will come.
That's the right thing to say.
Yeah.
But it has been. I mean, it must be a frustrating time.
I believe that despite all these difficulties, we have to demonstrate strategic patience. And we have to continue all these reforms.
Gia Nodia is a former minister of education and one of the few people in Tbilisi to openly acknowledge how little has changed in 10 years. Georgia has been talking about NATO membership for a long time now.
Right.
Is it happening?
Okay, it's not happening, but we have what we have. We have a promise that we will become members of NATO eventually, and this promise is reiterated on every NATO summit. I mean, the Georgian policy community understands that membership of NATO is somehow, somewhere far in the horizon.
But they don't say it.
They don't say it in public, of course.
Why not?
Yeah, because it's unpopular, because it plays into hands of Russian propaganda, because Russians say that, oh, the West does not care about you.
Pro-Russian parties have been making inroads in recent elections. And although 3/4 of the country still supports joining NATO, Nodia says relying on empty promises has left Georgia exposed.
War with Russia showed that the West supports us to some extent, but not really strongly. So we cannot fully rely on that. There is no plan B in the sense of joining some other security organization, but the plan B is really having very good relations with all our neighbors.
If Georgia joined NATO, do you think that would help this situation? Nothing seems to scare the Russians right now. Would you fight again? Really?
She's actually on the lower flat trail east of where the switchbacks take off.
Right now, we're headed to a mountain rescue. There's a adult female in her early 20s. They've been hiking today. It's already 1:01 outside, and it's not even 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Did you pass out?
No.
I mean, I recommend you going and get checked, for sure.
If you look at the data, we are absolutely running more heat-related calls than we ever did. Not just the extreme sport folks, but the folks doing day-to-day chores, right? Folks getting to and from work, we're finding them in heat-related emergencies.
After 95, that's not bad. But when it comes to 105, 110, 115, you're dying, you're dying.
You can feel the sun burning in your skin. You can't be outside, like indirect sun, like for 5 minutes.
This season isn't over yet, but last summer, a record 155 people died from heat in Phoenix. That's twice as many deaths as from Hurricane Harvey.
Heat is one of our biggest hazards, if not our biggest hazard in the city of Phoenix. It's not as glamorous as, oh, here comes a Category 5 hurricane. But if you talk about the number of fatalities of those incidences, heat kills more people annually than those things typically do. As a city, we are trying to understand how we can combine our efforts to make sure we can respond effectively. Just like groups are coming together and training for hurricane responses, we should be doing the same for heat.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Your family, your friends, your neighborhood. So some people might think that it doesn't apply to them, but it applies to all of us because we live in a desert.
Phoenix is the first city in America to plan for heat in the same way other cities prepare for storms. On top of planting trees to create shade and developing ways to cool down commuters, they're strengthening a network of air-conditioned shelters.
We are doing an outreach campaign. So it's just to inform citizens that there is a network of cooling centers available so they don't have to be stuck in places in which they can't escape the heat. So these are just little indications of heat exhaustion versus heat stroke. Okay. This is when you call 911. This is when you actually need to stay cool, okay? We have an English and Spanish. Hello? Do you know that the Salvation Army is actually a cooling refuge when there's excessive heat warnings?
Models suggest the heat will get worse. By 2050, the heat index is expected to reach at least 105 degrees for more than a third of the year.
Last year, when we got up past 120 and 121 and 122, catastrophic days. I mean, the world stopped spinning here in Phoenix. It worries me. Our strategy to become a heat-ready city, I think, is so critical for us because we need that comprehensive way of dealing with it.
So talking about when would be the right time to move from the heat and when would be the right time to sell?
I mean, values are going to go bad if it gets much hotter.
I'm looking for land in Prescott, and I will move there because I don't think I'll take it much longer.
Yeah, we hear this notion a lot of unlivability, and what we don't know is what mechanism would cause Phoenix to become unlivable. There are very few places that are growing faster than Phoenix and the other cities of the Sun Belt. If an investor thinks that Phoenix is going to be unlivable, I'm not sure why they're investing tens of millions of dollars. When we're thinking about climate change and heat, there are very few links that we understand better than this one. Climate projections suggest that other cities are going to start to be moving into more of this regime where heat is a chronic hazard. This is truly the grand question for cities across the world is how do we cope? Can we cope with the changes that are coming?
Get out! Get out! Get out now!
Really?
There's 3 numbers I can dial. 911. Okay?
Labor Day means the end of swimming season, and a chance to reflect on yet another year of blatant prejudice at pools all across America.
We are the only black people out here, and as soon as we walked up, she had something to say.
I'm just here with my baby, swimming. And I understand.
This is an American tradition that goes back almost 100 years.
Cleaning chemicals inside the pool in an effort to get the Negroes to leave.
During the 1920s and 1930s, when cities opened up large resort-like pools, they permitted males and females to use them together. And it was at that point that white swimmers and public officials imposed racial segregation. Most whites did not want black men to interact with white women at such intimate public spaces.
Legally, pools were desegregated after World War II, sometimes by court order. But integration on paper is one thing, cultural integration is another. And just like what happened in public schools, a lot of white people rejected it. And that prejudice created a stereotype.
Swimming became broadly popular within white communities, and it was passed down from generation to generation. Because of African Americans' more restricted access, swimming did not become a broadly popular activity among black families within black communities.
My grandparents couldn't swim because of segregation. When I was growing up, the only access I had to a pool was for summer camp.
Desria Holmes made swimming a priority for her family. Her daughter Madison and her son Mason are both enrolled in a program launched by USA Swimming that aims to get a more diverse group of young people in the water.
3, flip, go!
64% of black kids have little to no swimming ability, compared to 40% of white kids. And this has real consequences. A CDC report found that black kids are 5.5 times more likely to drown in a swimming pool than white kids.
When I saw the opportunity for my daughter to swim, and then my parents were able to see their granddaughter swim, they were actually crying because no one in our family swims like Madison. No one.
You can't really escape water no matter where you go. Swimming changed my life a lot. It taught me that I can be who I want to be. I don't have to be afraid of others, that I can do anything I really want to do.
Children, they either wrestle or play football or do some type of athleticism. And Madison is like, but I'm a swimmer. I'm different.
Hello, I'm Gaspard. I'm Xavier. I'm about justice. The lyrics of Love SOS are really like two words, and just over and over. What we like about those lyrics is that they are very open to interpretation. Yeah, at the same time, we found it cool to have like a proper love song. There is this kind of like hazy, dizzy feeling about the song. You'd probably be drunk and going home in a taxi, like with someone you don't really love. And you remember your high school sweetheart, thinking like, what am I doing with my life? The most important stem and the one that really gave us the tone for the track is this kind of siren. It's just a very long blue note and then it catches on the harmony. Auto-tune and a lot of reverb. When we play live, we can't ask too much to the equipment we have on stage. So we made this kind of sampler where we have like the same kick, maybe like 12 times, and it's just like tuned differently to fit on every track, you know. We made this for it to sound like this Prince track, or maybe it's Erotic City, where you have like this kind of like shaker with a lot of flanger on it. Sometimes you play the track and it works so-so, and then you just add a bit of like things like this and a good when it starts again. And it works like magic, you know. When you have a love song that is really overproduced, it can be very cheesy. We like things to be a bit like not dirty, but yeah, gritty in a way. The image I see when I think of this is like a toothpaste, you know, when you press a toothpaste and you have like everything like coming out at the same time. It's like all the colors in it. It's a song that personally I don't get tired of, which is a good sign because it's very repetitive. But if you pay close attention, it's moving all the time.